Hello, everybody. My name is Wizomi.
And my name is Tomato.
And together we're Jongers by nature. Welcome to, the first episode of this long overdue podcast. It has been planned and in the making for a long time. But before we really get into the meaty goodness of today's topic, a quick word from our sponsor.
Okay, so this podcast is sponsored by HasItSoScaped.com. HasItSoScaped. The ladies love it when you groom yourself and endure. Use our promo code HasItSoCrazy. That's HasItSoCrazy with a K to get 20% off your hazy grooming needs. But anyway, back to the matter at hand. What are we going to talk about in today's podcast with Omi?
Excellent. So, during today's podcast, we're discussing what would be a good topic to first discuss in our podcast, and we came up with a question that probably most of our viewers have come across themselves. Why we got into works of Fukumoto and how our history has been with it and what's so fascinating about Fukumoto's works.
Yeah, well, actually, just before we jump into that, there's a question that I had for you, Wizomi, because it was your idea to do this podcast, and a question that I have, and possibly a lot of the viewers as well, is, what made you want to do it? What made you want to start this podcast?
Yeah, fair point. I mean, why the hell are we doing it? I mean, maybe it's just me, but I felt like there's a significant lack of discussion of Fukumoto content online. I think maybe it will be one of the topics that we will actually cover today regarding our personal history. But for me, I was always so happy to hear about other people, discussing this, let's say rather niche topic. Of course, we cannot do the first episode of this podcast without mentioning manga bumps as an inspiration for what we're doing today. And it's basically, first of all, a way to have a good time to discuss with you, a fellow Fukumoto enthusiast, and to also engage with the community and maybe hear some takes of the other people later on in the comments or as potential guests for future episodes.
Yeah, that is true. Now that you mention it, there is a lack of podcasts about Fukumoto content apart from Manga Bums, famous.
Which, as much as I know, has been dormant for a little while, hasn't it?
Yeah, for quite a while.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for bringing it up. Definitely an important question to cover, but I think, as you already mentioned at the end of the sponsorship segment, back to the matter at hand. What is so captivating about Fukumoto's work, and how did we even get into Fukumoto in the first place? Tomato, maybe you want to share your story.
Sure. So actually, well, in order to tell you how I got into Fukumoto and manga in general and Japanese mahjong, I'll have to take you back in time when I was, I think, 12 or 13 years old. And there was one boy at my school who changed the course of my life.
Damn.
Because he recommended a certain app on, a certain app on the phone, right? And back then, apps were all the rage. I don't know about how it was with you, Wizomi. I think we're about the same age. But like when I was a teenager in secondary school, like apps on people's smartphones were all the rage. We had like Jetpack Joyride.
It was the first thing that just came to mind. I wanted to say Jetpack Joyride. It was literally the first fucking thing.
Yeah, hill climb racing, temple run. Yeah, I don't need to go on.
Exactly, the classics.
He recommended. He said, "Hey, do you have iFunny?" And it's just this app where like you scroll through funny images. I guess it's a bit like it's just a bit like Instagram or Reddit or 9 gag, you just scroll through funny images and you
Let's
can
put
leave a like and you can
the.
leave a
I
comment.
mean, let's put the funny in like apostrophes. But back then, honestly, when you're just a kid, that shit's funny as fuck. So I'm not gonna judge here.
Yeah. Yeah. But okay, occasionally, okay. So yeah, there'll be lots of funny images on iFunny memes and stuff like that. And I would really like that as a 12-year-old and 13-year-old. And I would keep
Yeah.
using it for a few years. And then eventually I kept seeing these things called green texts, right? You probably know what a green text is. It's those
Absolutely.
things from 4chan. So I would see a few of these come up. I wouldn't know what website it's from. I was just like, oh, this is like a funny kind of format. It tells a funny story. And then,
Better
okay,
that
so
way
I'd see
also
them
that
again
you
and
that
again.
you don't know where it comes from when you're in that age, honestly speaking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually, after seeing it again and again, getting used to it, I sort of
Yeah.
became curious. So, of course, I went to 4chan itself and discovered all the different boards. Well, not all the different boards because there's quite a bit,
Mm.
but just I looked at a few. I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend it, but it just so happened that while I was there, I was on the ADV advice board where people would share like life advice and talk about their situations. I'd say it's kind of an interesting board, and it was also work safe, so there wasn't any nasty stuff on it.
So
Um,
school safe as well.
and what'd you say?
So school safe as well in this case.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't go on it at school, but
Okay, okay.
yeah. Anyway, um, sorry, lost track of what I was saying. Yeah, so okay, so on the advice board,
Mm-hmm.
I saw this image where they basically cut. It was the part from Kaiji where Tonegawa makes the speech about living a provisional life. Like
Ah.
they waste their years, they work, and they age, and they die, and then they, even on their deathbed, they tell themselves, "No, wait, the life I have lived wasn't the real thing. I'm still waiting for my real life to start." So basically, it was a picture with like some still shots from that anime scene, and
Mm-hmm.
also the subtitles showing everything that was said in that scene.
Yeah.
So it really resonated with me. Not just what was said, but also the art style was really interesting. Okay, so we can obviously get into Fukumoto's art style a bit later. What's so
Yeah,
captivating about
exactly.
it? Right now,
Exactly.
I'll just finish the story of how
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was my path of how I got into this whole thing. So yeah, so obviously I thought it was pretty cool. The words resonated with me, and also the the art style. The edginess of
yeah. Yeah.
Fukumoto's art. All the
Quite,
sharp
quite literally, yeah.
edges rather than smooth photorealistic drawing. It was kind of interesting, and also something which I don't hear other people mention that much, I think, is the color scheme in the Kaiji and Akagi animes, particularly in
Ah.
Akagi. Actually, I just really love the bleak,
Mm.
dark coloring of it. It really adds to the atmosphere in such a great way.
Yeah, it
Something
is
which you
very
don't get
unique.
in
Very unique.
the manga, which is mostly black and white.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, so I was curious about what it is. So either I saw someone ask what the source was, or maybe I asked what the source was, but I figured out that this is from the Kaiji anime. So I gave it a try, and yeah, really liked it. Basically, I liked everything about that anime. I liked the story because I had checked out a few other animes. And to be quite honest, even as a immature teenager, like I
Mm.
still thought the stories, the storylines in the few animes that I've watched were like a little bit cringe, a little bit unrealistic.
Yeah.
This girl is like in love with the main character when he's really pathetic. I
Yeah.
feel like it's a bit unrealistic. But
Yes.
Kaiji was well, I I have like some criticisms of Kaji
Mm.
now that I'm a bit older, now that I'm in my 20s, but when I was like 15 or 16, I really loved it. I loved everything about it, basically. The story, the voice acting, the edgy shapes, the colors, and really the music. I wanna give a shout out to Tanyuchi Hideki, the composer who did the music for Kaiji,
amazing
Akagi,
work.
Death Note, and he's also got his own band that he was in. Shocking Lemon, big shout out to him. Really talented guy. I love him.
Listening
his
to
work.
listening to his stuff
He,
today, even.
Yeah, it's tragic what happened to him. For those who don't know, he was arrested for possession of, I believe it was marijuana, and I don't think, from what I remember reading, it wasn't even that like a very huge amount, which would imply that he was a drug dealer, but it was just like a larger personal amount just for his personal use, and he had to sit in jail for years and years. And from what I've heard, he's been released from jail, but he hasn't gone back to music. He just doesn't want that to be his future path anymore, which is
certified Asia moment. What can I say? Yeah, it's quite a tragedy, man. Maybe we can do another episode about music in the future. But Tomato, how after watching Kaiji, which I mean I will get into it in a bit also. I feel like it's the normal way of getting into Fukumoto. It's like with Kaiji. Of course you start with Kaiji, unless you're like in 50 years, or unless you're Fukumoto yourself. Okay, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. What I wanted to ask is, how, in what order, if you still remember, did you then experience other works of Fukumoto besides Kaiji? So, like, what was the next thing that piqued your interest, and why did you decide to continue after watching the anime, and then I'm assuming reading the manga after the anime ends after part 2, of course?
Well, actually, I didn't really. So when I was sort of 15, 16, watching Kaiji for the first time, it sort of didn't occur to me. Well, no, actually, I think I might have looked it up and found out about it. But okay. So I wasn't really super aware of the fact that the vast majority of animes in Japan are adapted from an initial manga, right? And I might have looked it up and found that out. So, okay, so this is based on a manga written by Fukumoto Nobuyuki. But even if I did know that, I think I did find that out. But even so, like, I didn't know where I could read it and whether it would be in English or not. Right?
You're just a bit too clueless at that age.
Like the whole culture scanlation, that like people take these Japanese manga and then they put them on the they translate them in English, translate them to English, usually for free, just because they love it, and then they'll take donations, or sometimes they'll be commissioned by someone for money to do a particular series.
Exactly.
But I wasn't aware of that whole culture, so I don't think I got into the Kaiji manga, or any manga, in fact, for a while, just because it was so far removed for me. It's a bit like going back to my story where I saw the green text for the first time. I enjoyed them. Oh, this is pretty cool. But I didn't really wonder that much where they were from, and go to the original source and stuff like that, until I saw a few more of them and became more and more familiar with it. So same thing for anime. Like I didn't get into manga until a bit later.
I think it's how it goes usually. But okay, I shouldn't throw the word usually around too often, when like all I can think of as examples are like just a handful of people who I've talked about this kind of similar stuff, not Fukumoto related, but in general, like how we experienced anime and manga as a child. So I should maybe be a bit more careful with the word usual. But I completely understand how it would have been for you back then. But so okay, then the question is,
I think what I watched
even
next
more.
Was...
What did you do next exactly?
Sorry, we've got a bit of a delay, so
No.
we keep talking over each other. We hear silence for a bit, and then it's like, okay, so now I need to talk and fill the silence. But there's a bit of a delay, so we don't know that the other person is talking. So now
Don't worry,
it's a bit
Tomato.
awkward.
It's gonna be
what
good
were
in
you
the final
gonna
recording.
say?
I'm keeping an eye out on it. Yeah, and my question burns even brighter now. Like, okay, if you didn't like really read manga, how did you move on, and how did you end up as someone who reads stuff like You're on Fire, Penchan, and makes a big sprinter mahjong tournament? Like, what happened that
Ah,
you moved on?
that that's insider information. That's top secret.
How you went from Kaiji to other works? It's a secret.
Yeah. No, never mind.
All right.
Well, I mean, I checked out Akagi, right?
Okay.
I must have seen it in the recommended list when I was watching Kaiji on some dodgy anime website with lots of pop-up ads.
Yes.
I must have seen Akagi and noticed that the art style looks similar, and then sort of look into it a bit more, realize, oh, it's done by the same animation studio, and the story is written by the same mangaka, and the music is done by the same composer. So, wow, maybe I'll like it. But then, the first episode, I start watching it, and then it's mahjong. I don't know about mahjong. So, but despite that, the atmosphere was so captivating. The
Yeah.
the music, the colors, of the mahjong parlor, and the thunder crashing, the rainy sky.
Yeah,
And
the
then
griminess.
Akagi comes in, covered in rain. The creak of the door as well, just before he comes into the parlor.
Yes.
The atmosphere is just I can't find words for it. It's yeah, I mean, if you've watched it yourself, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
If you know, you know.
Yeah,
if you know, you know.
A lot of people do actually say that they watched the whole Akagi anime even though they didn't know mahjong. And I think it's because of that atmosphere, the music, the art style, and the colors, and the sort of tension between the characters. Even if you don't know what's going on exactly in the game, you can still feel that tension.
Yeah.
Nango pushed into a corner, sort of losing his grip, losing his fighting spirit. He's backed into a corner. He's becoming timid. He's becoming afraid of his opponents. Just like Akagi said, just trying to survive rather than thrive, rather than defeat your opponent. Just trying to stay afloat and barely get out of it.
Which is a topic, which is a topic that comes up often in Fukumoto's works. So I don't want to go into too concrete spoiler territory as in today's episodes without explicitly announcing it. But today, I read the final chapter of You're on Fire Tenma, and okay, it's just there's only 6 chapters, right? It's not long, but I delayed reading it a little bit because it was not so high on my priority list. But also there, in the last chapter, it is so often is this topic covered where because you're backed in the corner, you are just trying to defend yourself and you don't think about winning anymore. And that's not a mentality. I feel like Fukumoto really wants to push forward this thought that this is not a mentality that is truly beneficial if you want to live freely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just in games of mahjong or in the general area of life, but also in other specific situations. For example, in a fight, if you're in a fight with someone, and in fact, there is a Fukumoto manga where this concept is literally explored as well. It's Kurosawa when he fights against Nakane. He realizes that if I just try and endure his attacks without actually aiming to defeat him, aiming to kill him proactively, I need to destroy this guy rather than just worry about my own survival, then you won't win. And if you think about a lot of other strategic games, like have you ever played Warcraft 3? Or have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've watched gameplay. So,
okay, well, yeah. Okay, yeah. So it's a game where you have to defeat your opponent, destroy all of his buildings basically, and you have your own buildings which produce units, and you build up an army and stuff like that. Well, yeah, basically there's a lot of situations in specific areas of life, and also more broadly, where if you don't proactively attack something, whether that's through a violent way or a non-violent way, like just putting your efforts into it, proactively attacking it, quote unquote, in that way. If you don't attack, rather than just try to endure, try to stay afloat, try to just barely survive and get out of it, then you will be slowly eaten away and defeated eventually.
Honestly, I wish I feel like I could have used this mentality a little bit earlier in life. So I used to play very regularly in amateur level chess tournaments. And whenever I was faced with an opponent that was significantly stronger than me, had like a much higher rating, like higher elo, I used to get very intimidated and just try to defend, and sometimes even have the thought overcome me that the best thing that I could potentially get from this match would be a draw, and I wouldn't even try to win. And of course, this was not all too beneficial back then. So it is a mentality that, can help both in this kind of game scenario, but also, like you said, in some potential real life scenarios. Tomato, I wanted to just comment on one more thing that you mentioned that was briefly addressed before we lose ourselves in sidetracks too much. A little story that I wanted to mention as you were talking about the atmosphere of the Akagi anime and how captivating it was for you. Because I think I told the story to you in a personal conversation before, but my mother actually really enjoys the Akagi anime, and she's in her 50s, and she really does not usually watch anime in any way, shape, or form, at least not on her own terms. Wow. And we watched it together, quite a few episodes, and like I was also like taken aback by how much she enjoyed it. And afterwards, she even got a little bit, a few mahjong lessons from me. So who knows? Just for context, she's not she's not Asian, so she has also never played mahjong in her life. I'm not saying that every Asian has played mahjong, but as a European, the chance is much, much, much smaller that you have encountered mahjong. So there is truly something that gets everyone in the anime adaptations.
Yeah, and just since you've thrown your story in, I'll throw another story that I wanted to throw in when you were mentioning your chess tournaments.
Oh, yeah, please.
That defensive mentality, what you just said, I felt a very similar way when, by the way, Wizomi, do you play Mahjong on Tenho.net?
Actually, Tenho I've never dabbled in, but like I do play so for context, currently I'm staying in Singapore, dear Jongers viewers, and in the arcades and also in Japan, of course, there are like some arcade cabinets where you can actually play mahjong with even a little bit of stake. So that's like the most tournament setting vibe that I ever had, was playing mahjong and some arcades with stakes, if that's what you were hinting at.
No, I wasn't hinting at stakes. I mean, I was just curious whether you played ranked. So
yeah. I mean, rank points. Yeah. Honestly, even mahjong is solo rank, even though it's probably a lot more casual. Yeah, I do play ranked. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, basically, for anyone who doesn't know, in Tenho there are 4 rooms. You know, like in Mahjong Soul, you have the bronze room, silver room, gold room, and whatever comes next. In Tenho, you have the Ipan room. That's the beginner room that anyone can play in. And then you have Jokyu, which is like, well, it translates to, I think, proficient or even advanced, right? But it's still kind of like mid-level, you know. Once you get there, it does take a bit of grinding and also a bit of like building up your skill at the game in order to get to the next room. And then the next room for fourth dan and above are 1800. That's the rating system that they have in addition to the dan ranking system. But yeah, fourth dan and are 1800 and above is Tokujo. And I remember when I hit fourth dan and my rating was above 1800 and I had my first game in the Tokujo room, then I felt exactly the same. I felt like every single move that I make, because back in Jokyu, that's the room I was at before, it felt a bit more relaxed. Like I still had to make an effort, but you know, I can sort of let my feel guide me. You know, play by feel. Right? And it's not gonna backfire on me terribly most of the time. Like I mean, everyone gets lucky and unlucky in mahjong, right? But
yeah, of course.
You know, I can get reasonable results just by not overthinking things. And then just my very first hand in Tokujo, I was playing super carefully. I was playing super defensively, right? I didn't want to deal in. I think I might have ended up dealing in anyway, despite playing so defensively. And I think I took like third place just because I didn't win a single hand, because I felt every time it was time to, you know, advance with a hand, I felt, no, oh, I need to be defensive. I can't possibly deal in because that would be disastrous.
He has and all caps because folded.
I didn't want to get I didn't want to get fourth place because then my rating would drop, and then I would not be allowed in the Tokujo room, despite still having the fourth dan rank. I still need the rating to be above 1800.
I
so that's why I was definitely trying to avoid fourth place. But in the end, I got third place, which also reduces your rating. And I think I had one game after that where I sort of thought, okay, I need to push harder. And then I pushed harder and I got fourth place and I was back to Jokyu room.
Oh man, so in the end, it didn't even matter.
What you have to do is just to get comfortable with taking risks when it's necessary, and not unnecessary risks. Just like picking your battles, basically.
I feel like we're getting some good idea about another episode idea where we talk about our favorite mahjong moments when we exhaust most of the Fukumoto topics, or we just want to feel like talking a little bit more about mahjong. I think we can share a few cool things because both in virtual mahjong and in some real life mahjong encounters, I think funny things happen. So I'm taking a mental note of that, Tomato, to maybe come back, if you're fine with that, to the topic of today's episode. I'm realizing I've not shared my deep history yet. Should I go ahead and do that?
True. I've been talking for quite a bit. Well, just to very quickly finish my story.
Please.
You know, after I watched the Akagi manga, watched the Akagi anime, I got curious about mahjong, and I sort of I also discovered, I got into manga, and then I thought, I think the way I got into it was again on 4chan. I saw people discussing the Kaiji anime, and then they were saying, "Oh, but he plays mahjong as well in part 3," and I was like, "Part 3?
Shit!"
And mahjong? That's the thing they were playing in Akagi, and I didn't know what they were doing. So that's what got me into learning the rules of mahjong, and also into manga as well, just because I want to discover what happens next to Kaiji, because I loved seasons 1 and 2 of the anime.
Yeah.
So then I discovered Kaiji Part 3, started reading that, and then I realized this Fukumoto guy has all sorts of different manga which I'm just gonna enjoy the hell out of. And so that's how I got into it. That's how I got into Mahjong and Fukumoto manga and manga as a whole in general.
Wow, I'm
But
honestly.
Please let me hand the microphone over to you now, because I think it's your turn to speak.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm just amazed that actually Fukumoto's works were also your ticket into enjoying anime and manga as a medium in general. That's the first. Yeah, it's cool that it really hooked you so much that you also got into other things afterwards. For me, it was a bit different. So I have been in touch with a lot of the mainstream anime since I was even younger than what you mentioned. Specifically, like I was always a One Piece enjoyer. I think because in Germany, after school hours, there were like one or two channels. I think either if there are any German viewers, RTL 2 and I think Tele 5. Just like as a little bite, if we have German viewers, I think after school they always showed One Piece episodes, and that just really caught my attention. So I was already aware of what anime and manga is, and I can actually exactly pinpoint to when I started learning about kaiji and that kaiji exists. And it is a bit embarrassing to admit, but my first contact with Fukumoto's works was, of course, kaiji in 2017 when I watched the video on the YouTube channel Mother's Basement titled "Why Kakegurui is a Terrible Gambling Anime." You know, it was the time where I really kept up with all these YouTube anime content creators because I had too much free time and really like to hear people discuss this. And back then it was just a channel, I'll be honest, that I really enjoyed. Nowadays I have not watched anything in years, but back then I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. Let's give it a listen, right? I mean, who would not click on a video why Kakegurui is a terrible gambling anime and has a face of a distressed kaiji on the thumbnail? So I was basically intrigued because he shit on Kakegurui in the video and mentioned that Kaiji is a much better gambling anime for the reason that Kaiji actually loses sometimes, and this is something we already. I initially I wanted to like really separate the points. First we talk about the stories and then about what's so appealing, but we've been like mixing it up. So I think we can talk about it in parallel. I really like.
Had you watched Kakagu? I don't even know how to say it.
Kakegurui. I have not. I have not. And it after watching Kaiji, then it was something I really prided myself in because back then I was really in the phase like, oh, I don't want to watch all this fan service stuff. Oh, and like similarly to you back then.
I want to watch anime for real.
Exactly, for real men, and I don't want any of this. Nowadays, like my taste has evolved, and like I don't mind. I'm just honest with myself. There's fan service stuff that can be quite tasteful as well. But yeah, back then I was like, no, I'm not gonna watch that. I'm gonna be Chad and watch Kaiji without any of that fan service. And what really hooked me is that Mother's Basement mentioned that Kaiji actually loses. Tomato, how do you feel about the fact that Fukumoto's works can be quite unpredictable in that regard?
Yeah, that is one of the things, because there's so many there's so many things about Fukumoto's manga and the animes which were adapted from it, which make it very different to the mainstream, and that's what another one of those things which you mentioned. The Kaiji did in fact lose sometimes. That made it a lot more real. Yeah, that drew me to it quite a bit. Made it seem a lot more realistic than these other animes with the main character with the the skinny, pretty-faced, slightly long hair guy, and there's like love interest, and there's like other girls that are obsessed with him, and he's like so smart. I'm mainly picturing Light from Death Note, but I'm sure there are loads of other examples.
I realized you had a favorite animation studio back in the day, maybe even now. Studio Mad Dog? No, how they called again? Mad, right? I think. Madhouse. Yes. Sorry for embarrassing myself right there. Yeah. Please go on.
Yeah, I don't really watch that much anime, so I suppose it's the only one I'm familiar with.
Okay.
But I mean, they did such a good job with Kaiji, Akagi, and if I'm not mistaken, Death Note, and also One Outs. Do you know if Madhouse did that? Yeah. So okay, so with all their amazing work on that, even though I haven't looked into other stuff that much, I'm still very comfortable to say they're my favorite. Even though I probably couldn't name any other.
Yeah. I mean, this would also be a topic for an entirely different episode. I mean, Trigger also does very beautiful stuff, and but I'm not here to flex my general anime knowledge, but I'm here to continue my story of what happened like after I watched that Mother's Basement video. I watched Kaiji Part 1, Part 2, the anime. In Part 1, seeing Kaiji lose and actually get punished and like being so close to victory but actually failing made me feel things and like emotions I feel like I never experienced while watching other media previously. Then I did the classic hesitation before reading Part 3 because I'm like, Mahjong. I mean, nowadays, both of us, I think you also have reread Part 3 at least once, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, when I reread it, I was like, damn, this is like, you need, I mean, I read it without having any Mahjong knowledge, but I was feeling like I was missing out on something. But after obtaining Mahjong knowledge and reading it again, I realized I did not miss out on anything. After getting through Part 3, though, I remember explicitly inhaling Part 4 and Part 5 in like 2 days and being like fully obsessed with it. Now we are here in Part 6 and the big Kaiji hiatus. I remember on the Fukumoto Crazy server there was someone I called them a little bit out because it was quite old, but it was like the like a schematic on how deep you are into Fukumoto and what works you read at what levels. And
dude, you know, actually, weird coincidence. I know. Shout out to Johnny BME because I actually know him from a different server.
Yeah,
he joined the Fukumoto Crazy server like recently, but I've known him for like years and years from a different server that's much smaller. So shout out to my boy Johnny.
I feel like we should make an updated version of that sometime. But like I was like jokingly bashing it a little bit, but if I'm honest, like it describes quite accurately of how I went down the rabbit hole. Because afterwards I wanted to read all the stuff, and that does not involve Mahjong. So I read Kurosawa. I read Zero Part 1 and Part 2. I read Shin Kurosawa up until where it was translated back then, which was right up until the beginning of the Aikido arc. Later on, I started to, I got older, got own income, and had the idea of just randomly asking. That's actually also how I got on the Fukumoto Crazy server, if I remember correctly. Or like one of the first interactions that I really had was I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna ask. Can I ask someone? Can I support someone to continue the Shin Kurosawa translation? And this is how I even got more involved with the community in the first place. But yeah, I obviously didn't read the Shin Kurosawa translations back then because they weren't out yet. So I, after reading everything non-Mahjong related, I eventually caved in and also read Akagi. And I read through the entirety of Akagi without having played a single Mahjong match myself. I must admit. I must confess.
Had you watched the anime before you watched the? Sorry, had you watched the Akagi anime before you read the whole Akagi manga?
I am now going to confess an even bigger sin, Tomato. The only Akagi anime episodes I have
No.
ever watched are the few together with my mother. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
so how many? How
It's
many?
like after I didn't even get to Washizu, so he just trashed Urabe and that was it.
Yeah, to be honest, in my opinion, you're not missing that much. I think the first few, yeah, the first half of the Akagi anime is peak, and then Washizu, it's kind of cool, but I mean, the aesthetic is kind of cool. The way they wear white suits, and he has that big
Yeah.
mansion that's like a castle with some, it I might be imagining this. I no, okay. I can't. I remember there was lots of like classical art, but I don't know if that was pictures on his wall or whether that was in the visual metaphors. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
the very gothic aesthetic of
Oh,
Washizu and his mansion and his servant.
you're talking about
He's
the
like,
metaphors. For this, I'm actually really curious because like one of my like favorite parts of Akagi, and of course, I think after we discuss this specific scene, we can talk about the topic in general, the metaphors. Because like one of my favorite
yeah.
moments is, of course, Washizu always talks about his God-given luck and how he has like all the gods on his side, giving him these divine draws. And then there's like a few panels where he's like drawing out of the little black pool in the middle of the jong table, and he has like all these deities next to him. Is that in the anime?
Maybe I can't remember. I don't look at that part of the anime too highly, to be honest.
Oh
I don't regard
wow!
it too highly,
Oh wow!
so I don't
Okay.
remember.
I was about to call myself lucky that I still have like the ability to enjoy the Akagi anime like without like for the first time, that I still have this opportunity if I ever feel down to really
Yeah.
enjoy it. But this is giving me, I mean, I'm still gonna do it and enjoy it, but this is giving me some doubts I didn't think I would have, Tomato.
No, I mean, well, did you enjoy the manga?
Of course.
Okay, well, if you enjoyed the manga, then you'll definitely enjoy the anime. Personally, I just did not enjoy the Washizu arc. I felt that it dragged on a bit too much, and the whole idea that Washizu is so lucky, I found it a bit boring. I found other Fukumoto works, like for example, well, slight spoiler alert if you've never watched Kaiji, but at the end where there's where Hyodo wins in the final gamble against Kaiji, and
Oh, maybe Tomato, repeat the last part
he
after.
starts bringing up that kind of mythical, magical imagery, talking in that kind of way. I have the luck of a king, and
Yeah.
you really start to believe it. Maybe I was just like a naive teenager, 15 or 16, watching it for the first time, but like I really felt that maybe this is what Hyodo is all about, that he
Yeah.
actually does have some kind of supernatural ability to be lucky, right?
Honestly
Because he
true.
was talking in a
Honestly
very
true.
very convincing, very selfish out that, and Kaiji kind of responds to that by relying on luck himself once his initial trick is foiled.
Yeah.
He's like, he's praying to God. He's praying that he'll draw it with
Kami-sama.
luck because Kamiya. Yeah. But then in the end, he realizes that this luck of Hyodo's was pure what's the word I'm looking for? Nothing
Yeah.
supernatural about it, just pure like he saw through it and he mechanically
The goddamn shot of his
practically
fingernail, of him using his fingernail to like put the little dent in the lottery ticket, man. I don't know why, but like the visual of his finger on that piece of paper is like, actually, I know why it is so stuck in my hand, because Fukumoto, not only does he always put focus on like the facial expressions, but also the hands. Because I mean, when you draw so much mahjong stuff, end up drawing so many hands also, and like the way the tension is displayed. And I mean, and this sounds like super nerdy now if I think about it, but honestly, like he gets like tension and feelings of excitement of like how the hands handle the mahjong tiles, but then also in other works, when you pick a lottery ticket, it's like because you in the Akagi anime also, you so oftentimes okay, this I actually only know from clips and from the manga, but you always like have the shots from inside the little black hole where they grab the tiles from, right? And you always see like the hands desperately grasping for the right tile, or Washizu like going through the tiles and being like, oh, is it this one? Is it this one? But maybe that's only something I noticed. Or have you ever thought about the visual element of the hands?
Actually, I hadn't noticed that myself, but it is interesting now that you bring it up. Yeah, I can sort of imagine that in my head now that you mention it. I'd focused more on the face and how much
how much
hands, like you said, and also the sweat, how much they sweat.
The sweat. This is something on the contrary that I have never really considered, but you're right. Just sometimes these shots when the villain gives his classic creepy Fukumoto smile, and they always have the sweat running down their foreheads.
Yeah. Oh, the villain having sweat on their foreheads.
Both. I mean, when they have like this evil smirk, when they're like, when they're staring into the like either Washizu staring into Akagi's soul, when they're like preparing a sneaky comeback, for example. But also when they're backed into a corner, they're almost sweating all the time. Oh my god, why did I never notice this?
I was thinking more about the protagonists, like Morita, and especially Kaiji. I remember seeing him sweating a lot in the manga, just seeing all the sweat dropped, and also in the anime, particularly where he's in the bog.
Yes. Do we even see like his shirt getting stains?
Oh, I don't remember that, but I just remember like because there's that GIF that when you want to send a GIF on Discord, and you search for Kaiji, there's one where he's his eyes are closed and his teeth are clenched and he's crying, and so the tears are drawn in a lot of detail, and there's a lot of them flowing. And I think there were moments as well where the sweat was like that as well, just lots of it, and like flowing out of the pores and stuff.
Okay,
but
it's getting
the hands and sweat.
As uncomfortable as it makes me talking about the sweat, I'm also realizing that it is specifically something like it depends on that Fukumoto must have like drawn the panel. It must be in the Fukumoto style, because when I think of Hiro and I think of Hiroyuki, I do not like picture any panel where he's like sweating bullets, but Hiroyuki, he also has like a baby face, so like but in that art style also like this raw expression of terror doesn't come up so often. Instead you have people going cuckoo much more often.
I do remember there was one panel that stuck out in Hiro.
Maybe for a quick disclaimer for Hiro, we should be a bit careful about like not talking too much about the end stuff, because I feel like not too many have read it yet. But please go on.
Well, so I won't talk about the end stuff, but there was one where I won't even go into detail, but just there was two people working together, and they had a mahjong cheating technique where they would pass tiles to each other in a certain way. And there was one moment where one of the two people was expecting a tile to come his way, but it didn't come, and he was so panicked at the fact that it didn't come, because not only is he not going to be able to complete the hand now, but he someone might see the irregularity and might find the extra tile, and they'll be disqualified for cheating and get in a lot of trouble, lose their reputation, maybe even be in some danger for like insulting the tournament in that way by cheating. We have some trouble with the Yakuza and stuff like that. So I remember, the suddenly panicked expression, and there was a lot of sweating in that as well.
Honestly,
I feel weird for it to
yeah.
Man, I just like the expressive way that the different emotions go on,
What will the viewers take away from today's episode? Fukumoto's work is captivating because of hands and sweat. I feel like we have at least one or two viewers who
I don't know why.
We will have, I think, one or two viewers who may be happy about this kind of conclusion, but our time is not up yet. One more stylistic choice that also fits into I have one point regarding this feeling of despair and how it is portrayed, and one point regarding the metaphors we were talking about earlier when discussing Washizu's and Hyodo's divine luck. First, regarding the fear, the feelings of fear, of course, we have the zawa and the classic Fukumoto distortions. And it's like something you find nowhere else. If another piece of work does this, then it is always framed as a Fukumoto parody, because they know that this mangaka has perfected this way of making situations just feel full of so much despair. What do you feel about the Zawas and the distorted imagery when someone is like completely losing it?
Yeah, that is classic FKMT for sure. What do you think of it?
It's like I feel like I've never attempted, but maybe it sounds like a fun exercise to try to introduce it to some of your own drawings. I mean, I don't draw too often, but I feel like it requires a lot of especially like hand drawing it or like even digitally drawing it, and not just like applying a filter to your picture. Can be quite challenging to really get this vibe. So I'm always really happy. I feel like in his more recent work, it does not show up so often. Probably because his most recent work just does not involve all too much of gambling and tense situations, but is more like focused on slice of life stuff.
Yeah.
Then regarding the metaphors, one metaphor that I'm always happy when I see the distorted imagery, but I'm also always happy when I see the Grim Reaper in Fukumoto's works. I don't know if you've recognized this as a reoccurring element, but Fukumoto loves to include the Grim Reaper on many, many occasions. When someone is backed into the corner in a life or death mahjong match, when Kaiji is crossing the steel beams, but even going as far back as like the I don't think Harukaze Guest House has him, but that era of Fukumoto already. Like I remember like when reading the manga on my phone, I would always like screenshot every single time the Grim Reaper is there, because it's always so fitting, maybe a little bit tacky, but iconic is what I want to get at.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Well, I wasn't raised in Japan, so I don't know how much it comes up as a trope, as something they're sort of culturally aware of. The Grim Reaper, as far as I'm aware, comes from European mythology. No, I don't even know, to be honest, for sure.
I would expect it, or I would assume
it is interesting.
Yeah, it's like the way the Fukumoto draws the Grim Reaper, like always like with the skull face. It at least feels like something that would come more from the Western interpretation of the Grim Reaper than an Asian mythology equivalent. But for this, I'm also not an expert. But it's just like the feeling I also get is like it's not something that I would expect in, and I also don't see in other Japanese work too often.
Yeah, I think, well, I was about to say, well, it does seem that Fukumoto is quite aware of a lot of different parts of the Western canon. So going back to Washizu, actually, even though I'm not a big fan of that whole arc, just because it's so drawn out and but okay, but I like the aesthetic of the whole thing because it's very, and I'm not even that much of a, I'm not really that well versed on literature, but I do think that it's quite clearly a reference to Dracula.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, okay, the whole vampire thing, these people were killed by sucking their blood.
Exactly.
That he has like a big castle. He's like very old. He's lasted a long time, and he has these servants that sort of has a strange relationship where these servants are not just like housekeepers or like they do a certain task and they get paid, but like they have a scene that they seemingly worship him, which is similar to the what do they call those when the vampire familiar when a vampire enslaves someone to do their bidding, that the person which is enslaved is called a familiar, or it can be an animal too, I think. And so the way that the white suits act is it's seeming more than just as a someone who does certain tasks for him in return for money.
It's like the only way they could have
more than just employees, but they have a deep reverence.
The only way they could have
they have a deep reverence for Washizu. They call him Washizu-sama, which is a honorific usually for some kind of lord or someone who's really, really important that they have a lot of respect for. They care about him so much. They're fine with him using his cane to beat them.
Yes.
They're just like, it reminds me a lot of the concept of a familiar relating to vampires.
The only way they could have driven this metaphor even further with Dracula.
Sorry, I'm talking over. The lag.
No, let me
now and that you.
Let me just quickly finish just a small bit. It's not so. It's like the only way they could have driven the metaphor even further down our throats if, like, later on in the later parts when he's like Washizu is being brought out by his followers or familiars of how you would call them, if they would like use a black umbrella to protect him from the sunlight. I just wanted to get this bit out of the system. Please talk more about the familiars.
No, I was finished. I was just saying that, I basically finished my point that the way they treat Washizu is it seems a bit unnatural that they would just almost worship him in that way rather than just keeping their distance as household, whatever they are supposed to do. I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe if we have more of the Washizu prequel manga, we would actually, because we already see how one of his followers gets so devoted and captivated by him. But I don't know. Maybe some of the other white suits also make appearances as well. For that, I have not read enough, so I'm curious. All right. Yeah, maybe to quickly, you also took a while to complete your story. I also just want to quickly wrap up. Like I mentioned, going from Kaiji to like the non-mahjong stuff to Akagi. Just to like quickly wrap it up. Afterwards, after Akagi, I basically learned mahjong. I had the luck of getting taught mahjong in Singapore. Both Reach Mahjong and Singapore Mahjong. And with this knowledge, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm ready. And I went completely into the rabbit hole. So I read Ten, I read Hero, I read Mamiya, I read as much of Washizu as it's translated, went into all the niche stuff. And even the adjacent gambling series that otherwise I would have probably not been interested in, like Usogui, Casino Gui. Because of Fukumoto's work, I learned about capoeira because of Batuk. It is like such a chain of events that led to me having like this very refined niche taste, which is also we already mentioned talked about. I'm going like through my list of what I wrote down of what is so captivating about Fukumoto's work, but just like the sheer niche of this topic, also like I really enjoy, and it makes it feel like special work because not. Of course, this is not supposed to sound like, oh, I'm gatekeeping this. Not many people can enjoy this because you need to know about mahjong. But it is like most things. If you're like part of the community and you can actually fully appreciate the work because you, know mahjong in this case, it's even more fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have any other point on your mind now that we have completed the stories? What has not been brought up yet? What you think makes Fukumoto's work so captivating?
Well, like you said, I have mentioned a few already, and you've mentioned a few already as well. I think if the podcast is already getting a little bit long, maybe we can. Well, there's nothing that's coming to mind. To answer your question, there's nothing that's coming to mind immediately. We can we could even pick up where we left off in the next episode if there's something significant that comes to mind after we finish recording. Yeah. But at the moment, I think we've discussed it quite a bit already. Yeah. There's nothing else that's coming to my mind immediately. What about you? What do you think?
I have two other posts, two other pointers listed. But I feel like they can be topics on their own. But to give a quick teaser, in case we do end up discussing this further in the future, I'm also just because I feel like, about this we could talk a long time, because for me, I love the sheer scope of some of his work, like Akagi, and the ridiculousness of how long the Akagi versus Washizu arc goes on. I feel like this is something that you don't find in any other series, and I really enjoy it, even if it is drawn out on sometimes. But from what I've heard, I feel like you may have some arguments against this, so maybe let's keep that for next time.
Sure.
And the other pointer is that the types of characters we talked about that there's not much fan service in Fukumoto's work, but to quote Dreamy Lavender on this, shout out in that regard, Fukumoto depicts cute Oji-sans doing cute things in his slice of life stuff, which is like a specific type of character, like these middle-aged men that are not really being covered in too many other series, which mostly focus like on high school and not even college.
I might have to stop you there. I mean, are you aware of the fact that these slice of life manga, for example, Ichinichi. Okay, I forget the.
It's not Fuku. Yeah. You're correct.
The story and art is done by someone else, but it's under Fukumoto's supervision, and it is of course based on Fukumoto's characters. But
you are correct.
Yeah,
you are correct. And spin-offs would also be something to discuss more in the future. No, I feel like with us coming to the end of both of our stories and having discussed all our pointers, this is a perfect spot to wrap things up for the first episode, man.
Yeah, there's a lot more that we can discuss, but let's take our time. Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly. I think with that, we can thank everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, we have been Jongers by nature, and see you in the next one.